My sister's lies cost me my kids being taken away from me, and my family blamed me. My name is Rachel, and I'm 34 years old. I have 2 kids, well, I have them back now, Ethan, who's 9, and Lily, who's 7. Their father, my ex-husband Derek, left when Lily was just 6 months old. He couldn't handle the responsibility, said he was too young to be tied down, and just vanished. No child support, no birthday cards, nothing. It was hard, but I made it work. I had a decent job as a dental hygienist, my kids were healthy and happy, and we had our little routine down. My sister Victoria, Vicky, as everyone called her, was 28 at the time this all started. She'd always been the golden child in our family. Prettier, more charming, could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I'd made peace with that dynamic years ago. We weren't super close, but we weren't enemies either. We'd see each other at family dinners, text occasionally, and she'd sometimes babysit the kids when I was in a bind. Vicky had been married to a guy named Brandon for about 4 years. Brandon was a successful financial advisor, made good money, and they lived in this beautiful craftsman house in the suburbs. The only problem was they'd been trying to have kids for 3 years with no success. Vicky had endometriosis, and after several failed IVF attempts, her doctor told her that carrying a pregnancy to term was unlikely. I felt terrible for her. I really did. I couldn't imagine wanting children and not being able to have them. Things started getting weird around March of 2022. Vicky began showing up at my apartment unannounced, which wasn't completely unusual, but the frequency was odd. She'd bring coffee or little gifts for the kids, and she'd stay for hours, just watching them play. At first, I thought she was just trying to be around children because of her own situation, so I didn't say anything. I wanted to be supportive. Then she started making comments. Little things like, "Must be so exhausting doing this all alone," or "I don't know how you manage on your salary." She'd look around my apartment, which wasn't fancy but was clean and comfortable, with this expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe? Or something else? One evening in April, I came home from work to find Vicky in my apartment. I'd given her a spare key for emergencies, but this wasn't an emergency. She was in my bedroom, which immediately set off alarm bells. When I asked what she was doing, she stammered something about looking for a phone charger, but my charger was plugged in right by my bed, in plain sight. I let it go, but I took the key back that night. I told her I needed it for a friend who was going to water my plants when we went to visit Derek's parents, a lie, but I felt like I needed my space back. Vicky got weird after that. She started calling our mom constantly, and I'd overhear parts of conversations when Mom would call me afterward. "Vicky's worried about you," Mom would say. "She thinks you're overwhelmed." I assured her I was fine, but Mom had this tone in her voice like she didn't quite believe me. In late May, everything exploded. I was at work when I got a call from an unknown number. It was a woman from Child Protective Services. My blood went cold. She said they'd received a report about my children living in unsafe conditions, and they needed to do a home visit immediately. I left work in a panic, my hands shaking so badly I could barely drive. When I got to my apartment, there was already a CPS worker there with a police officer. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had let them in when they showed up with a warrant. They went through everything. Every cabinet, every drawer, every corner of that apartment. The CPS worker, a stern woman named Patricia Holbrook, took notes on a clipboard while asking me questions. Were my children fed regularly? Did they see a doctor? Was I using drugs? Where were the children now? Ethan and Lily were at school, thank God. I answered every question, provided documentation, pediatrician records, school enrollment papers, everything. My apartment was clean. My fridge was stocked. There was no evidence of anything wrong because there was nothing wrong. But Patricia kept giving me these skeptical looks, like she didn't believe anything I was saying. Then she pulled out a folder. Inside were printed photos. My heart stopped when I saw them. They were pictures of my apartment, but not how it looked normally. In these photos, there was trash everywhere. Dirty dishes piled in the sink and on every surface. The bathroom was filthy. There were beer bottles scattered around. I didn't even drink beer. In one photo, there appeared to be white powder residue on my coffee table with a credit card next to it. "This isn't my apartment," I said immediately. "I mean, it is, but it doesn't look like this. Someone staged these." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "These photos were submitted with a complaint. They're dated from last week." "Last week I was at work." "Who took these? Who filed the complaint?" She couldn't tell me. It was anonymous. But as I looked closer at the photos, my stomach twisted. In the background of one shot, I could see a corner of something that made my blood run cold, a distinctive throw pillow that Vicky had given me for Christmas. It was turquoise with gold embroidery, really unique. But here's the thing, I'd spilled red wine on it in February and had to throw it away. The only person who might have kept something like it, or who could have staged a photo to include it, was someone who'd given me an identical one. The realization hit me like a freight train. Vicky had done this. She'd used her key before I took it back, or maybe she'd made a copy. She'd staged my apartment to look like a disaster zone, taken photos, and reported me to CPS. But I couldn't prove it. Not right then. And even when I tried to explain about the pillow, about my suspicions, Patricia just looked at me like I was making excuses. She told me that until they completed their investigation, Ethan and Lily would need to be placed in temporary foster care. I broke down completely. I begged them not to take my children. I showed them everything: my work schedule, my pay stubs, my clean home. Nothing mattered. They took my babies from school that afternoon, and I wasn't even allowed to be there when it happened. A social worker picked them up and told them mommy was sick and they needed to stay with a nice family for a little while. The next 48 hours were a blur. I barely slept. I barely ate. I contacted a lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Pruitt who specialized in family law. She was expensive, but I didn't care. I put it on a credit card. Jennifer told me that CPS cases were tricky, that even unfounded claims could take weeks or months to resolve, and that I needed to cooperate fully with their investigation. My family's reaction was worse than the CPS nightmare. I called my parents immediately, desperate for support. My dad answered, and when I told him what happened, there was this awful pause. Then he said, "Rachel, honey, is there something you're not telling us? Have you been struggling?" "No, Dad, I'm telling you someone set me up. I think it was. Your sister mentioned she was worried about you." My blood turned to ice. "What did she say?" "Just that you seemed stressed. That the apartment was getting messy. That maybe you were having trouble coping." "Dad, she's lying. She's the one who—" "Rachel, don't make accusations you can't prove. Vicky loves you. She's been trying to help." My mom got on the phone next. She was crying. "How could you let it get this bad? Those poor children. Thank God Vicky noticed and got them help." "Mom, Vicky is the one who called CPS. She faked those photos." "That's a terrible thing to say about your sister. She's been nothing but concerned. Maybe this is a wake-up call, honey. Maybe you do need help." They didn't believe me. Not for a second. And worse, at the next family dinner, which I wasn't invited to but heard about later, Vicky apparently broke down crying, saying how hard it was to watch her sister fall apart, how guilty she felt for not intervening sooner. My Aunt Lisa called me afterward to tell me how brave Vicky was for getting CPS involved, how it must have been so hard to make that call. I was completely isolated. My own family thought I was a neglectful mother in denial. I had no support system except Jennifer, my lawyer, who was basically a stranger. The CPS investigation crawled forward. They interviewed my neighbors, my coworkers, my kids' teachers. Everyone said the same thing: I was a good mom. Responsible. Loving. The kids were well cared for. Patricia seemed frustrated by this. At our second meeting, she admitted that nothing in their investigation corroborated the complaint except those photos. "But the photos are quite damning," she said. "They're fake. Someone staged them to look like my apartment. Ms. Winters, if someone went to that much trouble, who would it be? And why?" I wanted to scream. "My sister. I think my sister did this." Patricia wrote something down. "Why would your sister want to harm you? She can't have children. She's desperate. Maybe she thought if I lost my kids, she could." I stopped. It sounded insane even to my own ears. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have any proof?" I didn't. Not yet. The weeks crawled by. I got supervised visitation with Ethan and Lily twice a week for 2 hours each time. Watching them in that sterile visitation room, seeing how confused and scared they were, broke something in me. Lily cried every time I had to leave. Ethan, trying to be brave, would just go quiet and withdraw. The foster family was kind, apparently, but they weren't me. They weren't home. I threw myself into proving my innocence. Jennifer subpoenaed my building's security footage, hoping to catch Vicky entering my apartment. But the cameras in my building were practically ancient, and half of them didn't work. The footage we did get was grainy and inconclusive. You could see someone who might have been Vicky entering the building on one of the dates the photos were allegedly taken, but you couldn't see their face clearly enough to be sure. I started digging into Vicky's life, looking for anything that might prove her obsession with having children had driven her to this. I talked to Brandon's brother, Kyle, who I'd always gotten along with. At first, he was defensive of Vicky, but when I told him what happened, something shifted in his expression. "Vicky's been different lately," he admitted. "Really fixated on kids. She cries a lot. Brandon's worried about her mental state. She's been talking about adoption, surrogacy, anything. She even suggested they foster, but Brandon said she wasn't emotionally ready. Kyle, I think she tried to take my kids by making me look unfit." He was quiet for a long moment. That's a serious accusation, Rachel. I know. But I need help proving it. Kyle said he'd think about it. 2 days later, he called me back. He'd done something risky. He checked Vicky's phone while she was in the shower. He found text messages between Vicky and a burner number. The messages were vague but damning. Did you get what I needed? The photos look perfect. This has to work. Kyle sent me screenshots. It wasn't a smoking gun. The messages didn't explicitly say what the photos were for, but it was something. Jennifer thought we could use it to establish a pattern of deceptive behavior. Then, in late July, the break I needed finally came. Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor, came to me with something. She'd been cleaning out her closet and found a package that had been delivered to her apartment by mistake back in early May, right around the time Vicky must have staged everything. Mrs. Chen had been recovering from hip surgery at the time and had a nurse coming to help her. The nurse had apparently placed the misdelivered package in the closet with other items, and Mrs. Chen had completely forgotten about it until now. Inside was a receipt from a party supply rental company. Someone had rented items under my name: trash bags, disposable dishes, fake beer bottles, even a prop cocaine kit used for movies. The rental date matched one of the dates on the CPS photos. And the credit card used, according to the receipt, belonged to Victoria Morrison. Vicky's married name. I wanted to scream with relief and rage at the same time. I had her. I finally had proof. Jennifer filed an emergency motion with the court, presenting all the evidence: the rental receipt with Vicky's credit card, the suspicious text messages Kyle had provided, the testimony from Brandon's brother about Vicky's deteriorating mental state and obsession with having children, and a timeline that showed Vicky had access to my apartment and opportunity to stage the scene. The hearing was brutal. Vicky showed up with her own lawyer, playing the victim. She cried on the stand, claiming she only wanted to help me, that she'd never do something so cruel. But when Jennifer presented the rental receipt with her credit card information, Vicky's face went white. Her lawyer asked for a recess. During that recess, I saw Brandon in the hallway. He looked devastated. I didn't know, he said to me. I swear to God, Rachel, I didn't know what she was planning. Did you know she was struggling this badly? He nodded, tears in his eyes. I thought she was handling it. The infertility stuff. I thought we were working through it together. I didn't realize she'd become so desperate that she'd do something like this. When the hearing reconvened, the judge was livid. She tore into Vicky, asking her directly about the rental receipt. Vicky tried to claim someone must have stolen her credit card information, but the rental company had security footage. Jennifer had subpoenaed it, showing Vicky herself picking up the items. The judge ordered an immediate investigation into Vicky for filing a false CPS report. She also ordered my children returned to me immediately, with a formal apology from the department. Patricia Holbrook, to her credit, looked mortified. She apologized to me directly, saying this was unprecedented in her career. I got Ethan and Lily back that evening. They ran to me in the CPS office, and I held them so tight I thought my arms would break. Lily wouldn't let go of me for hours. Ethan kept asking if this was real, if they really got to stay home. I cried more that night than I had in my entire life. But my family was a different story. When the truth came out, I expected apologies. I expected remorse. What I got was denial and blame shifting. My mother called me, and instead of apologizing for not believing me, she said, "Well, you must have done something to push Vicky to this point. She was just desperate." My father was slightly better but still terrible. "This is a family matter, Rachel. We need to work through this privately. Don't press charges. Think about what this will do to Vicky's life. Think about what she did to my life," I shouted into the phone. "She took my children from me. She made everyone think I was a horrible mother. And you all believed her." "We're family," Dad said weakly. "Family forgives." I hung up on him. I was done. I pressed charges. Vicky was arrested for filing a false police report, fraud, and several other charges related to the fake CPS complaint. The case made local news. "Woman stages apartment to steal sister's children" was one headline. My family was humiliated. The weeks leading up to Vicky's court appearances were some of the strangest of my life. I had my children back, which should have been enough to make me happy, but the trauma of everything that had happened lingered like a dark cloud. Ethan started having behavioral issues at school, acting out, getting into fights with other kids. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me in for a conference and gently suggested that he might benefit from talking to someone. Lily regressed in some ways, sucking her thumb again, something she hadn't done since she was 3. She became clingy, afraid to let me out of her sight. If I went to the bathroom, she'd stand outside the door. If I went to work, she'd cry at drop-off, convinced I wouldn't come back. The guilt was crushing. Even though I knew intellectually that none of this was my fault, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have protected them better. I should have seen what Vicky was planning. I should have changed my locks sooner. I should have trusted my instincts when she started acting strange. Jennifer referred me to a family therapist named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who specialized in trauma recovery. The first session was just me, pouring out everything that had happened while she took notes and nodded with understanding. By the end of that hour, I'd gone through an entire box of tissues. What you and your children experienced is a form of psychological abuse, Dr. Mitchell told me. Your sister deliberately orchestrated a situation designed to cause maximum harm to you and your family. The fact that she used the system, CPS, which exists to protect children, as her weapon makes this particularly insidious. How do I help my kids get past this? I asked. That was all I cared about. First, you focus on creating stability and predictability. Children who've experienced trauma need to know what's going to happen next. Routines are crucial. Second, you let them talk about their feelings without judgment. And third, you bring them in here so we can work through this together. I started bringing Ethan and Lily to therapy twice a week. Dr. Mitchell used play therapy with Lily, letting her act out scenarios with dolls and toys. Slowly, Lily began to express her fears. She was terrified that the mean people would come take her away again. She had nightmares about being locked in a room while I called for her from the other side of a door she couldn't open. Ethan was different. He was angry. So angry that it scared me sometimes. In one session, Dr. Mitchell asked him to draw a picture of his family. He drew me and Lily, and then he drew Vicky as a monster with fangs and claws. When Dr. Mitchell asked him about it, he said, "That's what Aunt Vicky really looks like. She pretends to be nice but she's a monster. She hurt you and your mom and your sister," Dr. Mitchell acknowledged. That was wrong. But she's still a person, just a person who made very bad choices. I hate her, Ethan said flatly. I hope she goes to jail forever. I didn't correct him. I didn't have it in me to teach forgiveness when I hadn't found it myself. During this time, the legal proceedings against Vicky moved forward. Her lawyer tried every angle to get the charges reduced or dismissed. They argued that Vicky had been experiencing a mental health crisis due to her infertility issues and wasn't in her right mind. They brought in a psychiatrist who testified that Vicky suffered from severe depression and anxiety, which had impaired her judgment. The prosecution, led by an assistant district attorney named Marcus Webb, wasn't buying it. In a pretrial hearing, he argued that Vicky's actions showed clear premeditation and planning. This wasn't a spontaneous act born of temporary insanity, Marcus said. Ms. Morrison rented props, staged an entire apartment, took photographs from multiple angles, and filed a false report with specific allegations. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew it was wrong. This was a calculated attack on her sister, carried out with malicious intent, the judge agreed. Vicky's mental health issues might have been a contributing factor, but they didn't absolve her of responsibility. I had to testify at one of the hearings. Walking into that courtroom and seeing Vicky sitting at the defendant's table was surreal. She looked terrible, her hair was lank and unstyled, her face pale without makeup, her clothes hanging off a frame that had become rail thin. For a split second, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered Lily crying in that visitation room, and the sympathy evaporated. Vicky's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to paint me as vindictive, as someone exaggerating the situation because of sibling rivalry. Isn't it true that you and your sister have always had a contentious relationship? He asked. No, that's not true. We weren't best friends, but we got along fine until she decided to destroy my life. Isn't it possible that you're misinterpreting what happened? That your sister genuinely believed you were struggling and was trying to help? By faking photos? By renting props to make my apartment look like a disaster? That's not help, that's sabotage. But you can't definitively prove your sister was the one who staged those photos, can you? Jennifer objected, and the judge sustained it, reminding Vicky's lawyer that the rental receipt and other evidence had already established Vicky's involvement. But the question hung in the air, planting doubt where it could take root. When it was the prosecution's turn, Marcus walked me through everything methodically. The timeline, the evidence, the impact on my children. Can you describe the moment you were reunited with your children after they were removed? He asked. I took a shaky breath. Ethan ran to me, but he was different. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real, if this was permanent. Lily wouldn't let go of me. She wrapped her arms and legs around me like a baby monkey, and she kept saying, "Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave," over and over. We stood in that office for probably 20 minutes while she just clung to me and cried. I saw one of the jurors wipe her eyes. Even the judge looked affected. The most damning testimony came from Brandon, Vicky's ex-husband. He took the stand looking defeated and ashamed. Marcus asked him about Vicky's behavior in the months leading up to the CPS report. She became obsessed, Brandon said quietly. Every conversation was about babies. She'd see kids at the grocery store and start crying. She started following mommy bloggers online and printing out their photos. I found them in a box in our closet, just pictures of other people's children. When I asked her about it, she said she was making a vision board for when we had kids, but it felt wrong. It felt obsessive. Did she ever mention her sister Rachel during this time? Yes. She talked about Rachel a lot. At first, it seemed like concern. She'd say things like Rachel's struggling or I worry about those kids. But then it changed. She started saying things like Rachel doesn't appreciate what she has or some people get everything while others get nothing. There was resentment there. Did she ever explicitly say she wanted to take Rachel's children? Brandon hesitated, then nodded. One night, after we got the news that our last IVF cycle had failed, she was drinking wine and crying. She said, "Why does Rachel get to have two beautiful children when she can barely take care of them, and I can't have any?" I told her that wasn't fair, that Rachel was a good mom. Vicky got angry and said, "If I had those kids, they'd have everything. A big house, 2 parents, stability. They'd be better off with me." The courtroom was silent. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Vicky had actually said it. She'd actually believed my children would be better off with her. Brandon continued, "I thought it was just the grief talking, the wine talking. I never imagined she'd actually try to make it happen. When the police called me to tell me what she'd done, I couldn't believe it. But then I thought back to all those comments, all those signs I'd ignored, and I realized I should have seen it coming." Vicky's lawyer tried to rehabilitate Brandon on cross-examination, suggesting that he was bitter about the divorce and exaggerating Vicky's behavior. But Brandon stood firm. "I loved my wife," he said. "Part of me still does. But what she did was wrong, and I can't pretend otherwise. Rachel and those kids deserve justice." After Brandon's testimony, Vicky's defense pretty much collapsed. Her lawyer approached the prosecution about a plea deal. I was consulted about the terms, and I told Marcus I wanted the maximum consequences allowable. I didn't want Vicky in jail necessarily, I just wanted her to face real accountability. Vicky took a plea deal to avoid jail time. She got 3 years of probation, had to pay restitution for my legal fees and the costs of the CPS investigation, was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation and treatment, and had a restraining order placed against her preventing any contact with me or my children. Brandon divorced her 6 months later. He told Kyle, who told me, that he couldn't reconcile what she'd done. He thought he married someone kind and loving, not someone capable of such calculated cruelty. Vicky moved to a different state to escape the judgment and start over. The restitution payments became another source of conflict. Vicky was supposed to pay me $3,000 a month to cover my legal fees, therapy costs for the kids, and lost wages from the time I'd had to take off work during the investigation. The first few months, the payments came grudgingly but on time. Then they started coming late. Then they stopped altogether. Jennifer filed a motion for contempt of court. Vicky appeared before the judge claiming she couldn't afford the payments because she couldn't find steady work. The judge was unsympathetic. "You created this situation, Ms. Morrison. You'll find a way to meet your obligations or face additional consequences." Vicky's wages were garnished after that. According to Kyle, who heard it from Brandon, this humiliated her even more than the criminal charges. She'd gone from being a well-off suburban housewife to having her paycheck seized by court order. Every 2 weeks, she was reminded of what she'd done and what it had cost her. During this period, I also had to deal with the aftermath at work. My employer had been understanding during the CPS investigation, but there were whispers. Some co-workers had seen the news articles. One of them, a woman named Diane who I'd never particularly liked, made a comment in the break room about how where there's smoke, there's fire, and maybe CPS had been right to investigate me even if they didn't find enough evidence. I reported her to HR. The company made her apologize, but the damage was done. I knew people were talking about me, questioning whether I was really a good mother or if I'd just gotten lucky that the investigation hadn't found anything. It was exhausting constantly defending myself, constantly proving I was a good person. My boss, a kind man named Robert Martinez who'd been supportive throughout everything, pulled me aside one day. "Rachel, I know this has been hell for you. If you need to transfer to a different office, I can make that happen. Fresh start, people who don't know your history." I considered it. A fresh start sounded appealing. But then I thought about running away, about letting Vicky's actions chase me out of my job, my community, my life. I decided to stay. I decided to hold my head high and let my work speak for itself. Eventually, the whispers died down. New office gossip replaced the old, and life moved on. At home, the healing process was slow but steady. Dr. Mitchell taught me grounding techniques to help the kids when they felt anxious. We established bedtime routines that made them feel safe. I bought Lily a special nightlight that projected stars on her ceiling, and she'd count them when she couldn't sleep. For Ethan, we started a journal where he could write or draw his feelings. Some of his entries were heartbreaking. I was scared Mom was gone forever. I was scared the foster people would keep us. I was scared we did something wrong. We talked a lot about how none of this was their fault. That was crucial. Both kids had internalized some guilt, wondering if they'd been bad and that's why they were taken away. I must have told them 1,000 times that they were innocent, that this was all adult problems they got caught in the middle of. One breakthrough moment came about 8 months after getting them back. We were at the grocery store, and Lily saw a woman who looked vaguely like one of the CPS workers who'd been in our apartment that first day. Lily started to panic, her breathing quickening, her eyes filling with tears. I knelt down right there in the cereal aisle, held her hands, and walked her through the breathing exercises Dr. Mitchell had taught us. Look at me, baby. You're safe. That's just a lady buying groceries. She's not here for us. We're just here to get dinner, remember? We're making tacos tonight. Lily nodded, her breathing slowing. Tacos with the crunchy shells? The crunchiest. And extra cheese, just how you like it. Okay. She took a deep breath and let it out. I'm okay now, Mommy. That small moment of her being able to calm herself, to work through the panic, felt like a massive victory. We were healing. Slowly, painfully, but we were healing. Meanwhile, Vicky's life continued its downward spiral. Through Kyle, I heard bits and pieces. She'd moved to Arizona, thinking the distance and desert climate would give her a fresh start. She found work at a call center, one of those places that handles customer service for a cable company. The work was mind-numbing and the pay was barely above minimum wage, a far cry from the comfortable life she'd had with Brandon. She tried to make friends but struggled. There's a certain social currency in Arizona's suburbs, especially among women in their late 20s and 30s. Conversations inevitably turned to families, to children, to school districts and pediatricians. Vicky had nothing to contribute to these conversations. And she couldn't explain why without revealing her past. One woman, a neighbor in her apartment complex, had started to become friendly with her. They'd have coffee occasionally, chat by the mailboxes. Then the neighbor's sister came to visit from out of state. The sister happened to be from our hometown. She recognized Vicky immediately from the news coverage. Within a day, everyone in the complex knew who Vicky was and what she'd done. The friendly neighbor stopped talking to her. People would see her coming and cross the street. Vicky called my mother, sobbing, begging her to make it stop somehow. But what could my mother do? The truth was the truth. It was public record. It would follow Vicky wherever she went, because in the internet age, nothing ever really goes away. My parents' response to all of this remained infuriatingly consistent. They saw Vicky as the victim of her own mental illness, as someone who'd made a terrible mistake but deserved compassion. They saw me as vindictive for pressing charges, for not accepting Vicky's tearful apologies, for refusing to be part of the family reconciliation they desperately wanted. My Uncle James, my father's brother, called me once during this time. He was the only family member besides Kyle who seemed to understand the magnitude of what Vicky had done. Your parents are in denial, he told me. They can't accept that their golden child is capable of something this malicious. It's easier for them to believe you're overreacting than to face the truth about Vicky. Do you think I'm overreacting? I asked him. Hell no. What she did was evil, plain and simple. And the fact that the rest of the family won't acknowledge that is just as bad. You're doing the right thing protecting yourself and your kids. It helped to have at least one person in my biological family validate my feelings. Uncle James sent birthday cards to Ethan and Lily, always with a check inside and a note telling them how loved they were. He respected my boundaries but made sure my kids knew they had family who cared about them. My parents continued to make excuses for her. Mom said Vicky was sick and needed compassion, not prosecution. Dad said I was being vindictive by not dropping the charges. My Aunt Lisa started a whisper campaign that I was exaggerating what happened, that Vicky had just made a mistake born of desperation. I cut them all off. Completely. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on social media. I told them through my lawyer that they were not welcome in my life or my children's lives. If they wanted to support Vicky's actions, they could do it without me. It was lonely at first. Holidays were quiet. But Ethan and Lily were happier without the toxic drama. I built a new support system with friends from work, other single moms I met through the kids' school, and eventually, a really great therapist who helped us all process the trauma. Now, here's where the revenge part really comes in, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. I didn't have to do anything. Karma handled it for me. About a year after everything went down, I heard through Kyle, who stayed in touch because he felt guilty about his sister-in-law's actions, that Vicky's life had completely fallen apart. The move to another state didn't help because the story had made enough news that people there found out about it too. She couldn't keep a job because employers would Google her and find the articles. She was living in a studio apartment, working part-time at a call center. Then, last spring, something happened that felt like the universe finally balancing the scales. Vicky had met someone new, a man named Chris who apparently didn't know about her past. They'd been dating for several months, and things were getting serious. According to Kyle, Vicky was happy for the first time in years. She thought she finally had a chance to rebuild her life. Chris proposed. Vicky said yes. And in the excitement, she posted about it on social media, a platform she'd stayed off of for years but couldn't resist using to share her joy. Within 48 hours, someone from our hometown saw the post and sent Chris a link to the news articles about what Vicky had done. Every ugly detail. Chris called off the engagement immediately. He told her he couldn't marry someone capable of what she'd done, especially since he had a daughter from a previous marriage and couldn't risk having Vicky around her. Vicky spiraled. She called my mother, hysterical, begging her to call me and ask me to somehow make the articles go away, to recant my statement, to do something. My mother actually did call me, breaking 3 years of no contact, to beg me to help Vicky. She's lost everything, Rachel. She's suicidal. Please, she's your sister. I felt nothing. Maybe that makes me cold, but after what she put me through, I couldn't summon sympathy. She did this to herself, Mom. She made her choices, and she has to live with the consequences. Just like I had to live with the consequences of her lies. How can you be so cruel? How can you still not see what she did to me? I hung up and blocked the new number Mom had used. More recently, just a few months ago, I heard the final piece of information that made everything feel complete. Vicky had moved back home with our parents. At 31 years old, she was living in their basement, barely working, completely isolated. My parents were supporting her financially and emotionally, but even they were starting to crack under the weight of her presence. According to Kyle, who heard it from Brandon, who still occasionally talked to my dad, my parents were fighting constantly. Dad blamed Mom for coddling Vicky. Mom blamed Dad for not helping enough. Their marriage was strained to the breaking point. And Vicky? She'd become a shell of who she used to be. The golden child who could do no wrong was now the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale, the sister no one talked about at gatherings. Meanwhile, my life got better. I got a promotion at work. Ethan made the honor roll. Lily joined a soccer team and scored the winning goal in their championship game. I started dating again, nothing serious yet, but it's nice to feel like myself, like someone worthy of love and not just survival. I ran into my Aunt Lisa at a grocery store a few months ago. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, like she wanted to run. Instead, she approached hesitantly. Rachel, I owe you an apology. I didn't understand what really happened. I should have believed you. I stared at her. You had all the evidence in front of you. You chose not to believe it because it was easier to believe I was a bad mother than to believe Vicky was capable of something so horrible. I know. I'm sorry. She really fooled us all. No, she didn't fool you. You wanted to be fooled. There's a difference. I walked away, and I didn't feel bad about it. The truth is, I don't think I'll ever fully forgive my family. They chose Vicky over me when I needed them most. They doubted me when I was telling the truth. And even now, their apologies feel hollow because they come only after Vicky's lies became undeniable, not because they genuinely realized they'd wronged me. Ethan asked me about Aunt Vicky a few weeks ago. He's old enough now to remember bits and pieces of what happened, though I've shielded both kids from the worst details. Why doesn't she come around anymore? He asked. I thought about how to answer that. I could tell him she was busy or lived far away. But I decided on honesty, age-appropriate honesty. Aunt Vicky made some very bad choices that hurt our family. Sometimes when people hurt us, we have to love them from a distance to keep ourselves safe. He seemed to accept that. Like when Tommy hit me at school and I don't play with him anymore? Sort of like that, buddy. I think about Vicky sometimes, usually late at night when the house is quiet. I don't hate her anymore. Hate takes energy I don't have to spare. But I don't feel sorry for her either. She made a calculated decision to destroy my life because she wanted what I had. She was willing to traumatize my children, willing to put them in foster care, willing to make me look like an unfit mother, all to satisfy her own desperate desires. Every consequence she's facing now is a direct result of her choices. The lost engagement. The ruined reputation. The destroyed relationship with her ex-husband. The isolated life in our parents' basement. I didn't cause any of that. She did. Sometimes people ask me if I feel like I got my revenge. The truth is, I didn't need to get revenge. I just needed to survive, to protect my kids, and to rebuild our life. Vicky's punishment came from her own actions catching up to her. All I did was refuse to be her victim twice, once when she tried to take my kids, and again when everyone expected me to forgive and forget. My revenge, if you can call it that, was moving on. It was being happy. It was watching my kids thrive. It was building a life so good that when I occasionally hear updates about Vicky's struggles, I feel nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, nothing. She's simply not part of my story anymore. Last month, my dad sent a letter through Kyle. He didn't dare contact me directly. In it, he apologized. He said he understood why I'd cut them off, that he should have believed me, that he'd been a coward for not standing up for me against the rest of the family. He said he missed his grandchildren and would do anything for a chance to be in their lives again. I haven't responded. I'm not sure I will. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And maybe that's okay. Maybe protecting my peace and my children's well-being is more important than maintaining relationships with people who've proven they can't be trusted. This whole nightmare taught me something important. Family isn't just about blood. It's about loyalty, trust, and showing up when it matters. The people who've become my family now, my close friends, my lawyer Jennifer who went to battle for me, my co-workers who supported me through the investigation, even Mrs. Chen who found that crucial receipt, they're more family to me than the people who share my DNA. Ethan and Lily are happy. They're healthy. They're loved. They don't remember much about those weeks in foster care, thank God, though Lily still has nightmares sometimes. We've worked through it with therapy and time and a whole lot of love. As for Vicky, I heard she's working at a warehouse now, night shifts. She has no friends, no prospects, no life to speak of. My parents are aging and won't be able to support her forever. What happens to her then, I don't know and I don't care. I rebuilt my life from ashes. I proved everyone wrong. And every day that I wake up with my children under my roof, healthy and safe in mine, that's my revenge. Every day that I'm happy despite everything she tried to take from me, that's my revenge. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. It's refusing to let them destroy you. It's thriving despite their worst efforts. It's building something so beautiful out of the wreckage that when they look at what they lost and what you gained, they understand exactly what their choices cost them. Vicky wanted my life. Instead, she lost her own. And I didn't have to lift a finger to make that happen. Sometimes, karma doesn't need any help. It just needs time. I'm happy now. Really, genuinely happy. And that, more than anything else, is the sweetest revenge of all.